Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
All right, welcome to another Military Spotlight edition of our show. This is a show where we showcase military veterans and organizations that support them. Today, calling in is Glenn Banton of Operation Supply Drop. Pretty excited about talking to Glenn today. Operation Supply Drop is, I'm going to make sure that I get this right, so I'm going to take it right from the press release from the show, from your website. Mm-hmm. And so it was founded in 2010. Operation Supply Drop brings veterans and civilian supporters together. They are the most generationally relevant veteran support group on the planet. They serve not only U.S. troops, but also NATO and ANZAC veterans via 3 primary programs. And let's start off. I'd like to ask you, Glenn, what are your demographic, or what is your ideal person that you're trying to support with your program?
That's a great question, and also thanks for having me on here. The key demographic is really, this is kind of a little bit nebulous, but it's this generation of veterans and active duty personnel, so to speak. Really what we've seen is there's a lot of there's many amazing programs that are out there, but once you got past kind of the World War II, Vietnam, Korea War era veterans, you start to see this breakdown of how veteran service organizations are formed. They typically end up being narrow and deep as opposed to providing kind of a broader service or community. And so we wanted to make sure, we could do that. And, the original idea was, sending these video game care packages to deployed troops, and that's since grown into a massive community organization that exists in dozens of cities around the globe, supporting veterans and giving back to the community worldwide.
Well, when I was taking a look at your website, it seems like there's basically 3 primary programs that you work through. The first one called Supply Drops. Could you talk to me a little bit about that program?
Yeah, absolutely. So Supply Drops is really, as the name states, that's really our starting program. So definitely not like, they're care packages, but not like, your mom sent you when you were away at Cub Scout camp, tiny little box with some cookies in it and maybe some high C or fruit punch. These are typically minimum 20-gallon tubs, and oftentimes a single supply drop can have up to 8 to 10 boxes. But they're, packages of hardware and software, Xboxes, PlayStations. We also have an amazing partner called Games, that's GAEMS, that makes this semi-rugged, portable TV unit. Looks like a suitcase, has a screen built into it that you can also put an Xbox or a PlayStation in. And then dozens of games, other geek swag, so to speak. But these are going to troops that are deployed downrange. These are going more and more often to outfit entire rec centers. We're really closely involved with the new rec center being built at Luke Air Force Base. We're in the process of outfitting or re-outfitting a lot of the rec centers at Camp Lejeune. And then also through a sub-program of that one called Respawn, we work very closely with a lot of the rehabilitation hospitals, military hospitals, as well as WTBs. So bottom line, it's a morale boost, whether you're active duty or you're, a recovering veteran. And again, this generation, but let's face it, people up to 50 and 60 years old are very active in playing video games. It's just something that's enjoyable. And so that's what we aim to do with that particular program.
If I don't, remind me, I want to get back to the Respawn. I find that fascinating. That part of the program as far as rehabilitation. But for now, let's move on to the second program that I see highlighted, which is the teams. What's the teams concept?
Yeah, so the teams is essentially, if I had to put kind of a tagline, it's veteran support where you live. I think the cool part about the program is its backstory. Essentially, again, as we're set up as this extremely generationally relevant organization, we had a lot of the troops that we would support while they were active, they'd get out or they'd come back home, and we'd get calls constantly or emails constantly that says, I have this issue, where do I get help? And those issues typically are, it's a mental health call it what it is. A lot of it's, potential suicide prevention, but there's just a general mental health question that pops up a lot. And then there's the homelessness side of things, and then there's the unemployment side of things. We call them the big three. And, from an organizational leadership perspective, we never want to turn away a veteran that needs help. Oftentimes, and I'm sure you can relate to it, one of the toughest things that I think a lot of the men and women that have served, don't do is ask for help, because you're almost not trained to do so, or you're not trained to do it in the context of, being a civilian once you're done with your time in the military. And so we ended up kind of realizing, yes, you have amazing organizations, many of which we actually partner closely with, like, IAVA, Iraq, Afghanistan Veterans of America, or, kind of the older guard, your AMVETs, your VFWs, but nobody really had kind of the social support structure coupled with, continuing to serve and volunteering in the community. And that's how the teams was born. I mean, it was born from our actual support base itself, because they started asking, hey, what else can I do? And it didn't make sense to necessarily plug them into some more partners. So we propped it up. And, here we are kind of formally about 18 months after our soft launch, and we're in about 40 cities around the globe. We have about 850 active volunteers, probably thousands of others that, participate. And, they have two primary focuses. One, continue to give back and serve the community. And that oftentimes is working with other partners. Maybe it's Coats for Kids. It's, doing cleanups. It's helping with, serving the homeless. And then the other part, we call it mandatory fun. It's getting together and, building camaraderie, looking at, real life needs a morale boost as well. And oftentimes a lot of these underlying issues that veterans are dealing with can be softened significantly with a much stronger support base.
Outstanding. Now, the other program I saw was the thank you deployments. What's entailed with that?
Yeah, so that's awesome. That's kind of, again, it's a product, and again, you hear this theme. It's a product of the team. So thank you deployments are these VIP outings or VIP experiences. The nominees typically come from our community. So they'll notice, a veteran, so sometimes they're injured veterans, sometimes they're not, but somebody that's really giving back, being selfless, and the community says, hey, this person deserves a thank you deployment. Those cover everything from VIP trips to gaming and entertainment conferences, oftentimes ones that you could only get into if you're in the industry, and even the access we're able to provide is beyond what, even industry people can get. We've also taken them to VIP trips to the X Games, golf tournaments. We had a couple veterans we took to the Jackie Sherrill shootout a couple weeks back up in Dallas with a bunch of Dallas Cowboy greats like Ed Too Tall Jones. But really, what it boils down to is it is what it says. It's a thank you deployment. And we try to keep them for the most part relatively local to where the veteran is. A lot of the individuals in our organization that are either volunteers or some of them are part of our leadership that have, received these type of things from other organizations in the past, always thought it was weird to, you bring somebody from San Diego and you fly them all the way to Miami, Florida for this amazing experience. They meet some people and then they go back home. And so the experience was still there, but the relationships you built, you can't get out and grow those any further. And so what we've found is if we can, for instance, in the Jackie Sherrill shootout in Dallas, find a couple of local veterans, give them that experience, the hope is that when we involve our community or we grow our relationships with the organization with the other people at that event, we can continue to provide local support to those veterans, in the form of a community that could help them with further things like their mental health or potential employment in the future. So everything keeps coming back to, no matter what the program is, how do we have that, that safety net? So even if we did something awesome today or for this hour, well, what happens after that? How can we make sure that we're improving the lives of veterans, every day after that awesome time?
It's a great plan to have that continuity, that idea that no matter what or when, they can still reach out to somebody else.
Absolutely.
Now, there's another program you have, that the 8-Bit Salute. And it's a fundraising program. How does that work?
Yeah, so, because of our supply drops and it really, being being output of the support we get from the gaming community, and again, gaming being extremely generationally relevant. One organization we work with is called the ESA. It's the Entertainment Software Association. They're essentially the lobby group for gaming. But you look at the fact that over 51% of the population in general plays video games now. And again, it's the age, the ages is incredible. I mean, you could literally be 7 or 70, or probably more like 3 years old, or, 90 years old. But within the veteran community, I believe that's even higher. Again, I don't have statistics to back it, but I think we can kind of anecdotally say that. That being the case, 8-Bit Salute was born of the gaming community. The gaming community itself is very supportive of charitable efforts. There's other organizations like Child's Play, Extra Life, St. Jude's that benefit, very, very much financially from the gaming community. 8-Bit Salute is our version of that. So it's now a biannual campaign. Right now we're in the midst of Military Appreciation Month, and so it's 8-Bit Salute Military Appreciation Month. And, the gamers end up playing games and raising money while doing it. There's products or platforms like Twitch, twitch.tv, where there's people playing games to a live audience, which, again, I'm not sure the demographic listening to this. Many will go, I know exactly what it is. Many of them will say, what the heck, you mean Twitch like when I've drank too much coffee? But it's something where even I watched a lot, and I have a lot of friends that are on there. I mean, we have hundreds of veterans and even active duty soldiers that stream on this. It's again, to keep coming back to the word, generationally relevant. It's the entertainment that is enjoyed. And then while they're streaming, they're soliciting donations that end up benefiting us. And so, kind of looking at the abstract, it's really no different than if you were to go sign up for a 5K and you go ask for donations for people to support you in the 5K. This just happens to be a video game marathon, or game-a-thon as they'd call it, and it's generated hundreds of thousands of dollars, that end up benefiting our programs over the past 5 years.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned before with the supply drops was that it's actually you're sending out some of the video equipment and all. So from what I saw also on the website, one of the ways that some of these gamers could help support veterans would be they're all, gamers are usually looking for that next-gen game, that, the next-gen system. But I see that you can actually receive donations of, gently used equipment or games that can go into your warehouses and can go out there to support these guys overseas.
Absolutely. I mean, if you go on the website, you can see that under supply drops, donate your used gear. You can always email inkind@operationsupply.org. But one of the things a lot of people don't always realize is especially the last gen stuff is super important to us. Not just obviously for the deployed troops. Obviously they're in some cases in austere conditions and, don't have the internet to handle some of the bigger updates or the bandwidth needed for your Xbox Ones and your PS4s. So the PS3, the Xbox 360 becomes particularly necessary. But even more so, a lot of people don't realize, like at Camp Lejeune, they have 7 rec centers, and 6 of them don't have the internet capabilities. And I think part of it is actually an IT and security situation that we're actually trying to help them through. But they can't also have the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4 because, again, of some of the criteria for the internet. Or even, Brooke Army Medical Center, and I know we'll talk about the Respawn program a little bit more here in a second, but when we went and worked with their burn unit, here it is, this top-end, amazing hospital facility in a major city in the United States, and you can't just show up and hang an Xbox One on the network. It ended up, taking weeks in order to get that Xbox to where it needed to be so they could utilize it in the way that it was intended to do. So, for the most part, for those listening, I mean, you obviously have a choice. You can take your used games and you can put them on eBay or go on Craigslist or take them to I won't name any names because a lot of them are actually big partners of ours, but some of those used game stores that exist in your community, and, you can get 10% or, a nickel on the dollar for their value, or you can send them to us. We turn that stuff around really, really quickly to understand volume. I mean, we've sent in the past 5 years over 500 supply drops. And again, as I mentioned, that's not 500 packages. That's 500 units or rec centers that we've supported, oftentimes sending, over 10 boxes to these. So we can move games. I think last year we sent out over 250,000 games. This year, I believe we're probably going to do over 500,000. So even that one is super important. Go down to USPS, grab that flat rate envelope. You can drop a couple in there and send it to us, and typically those will be out in the field oftentimes in less than 30 days.
And I've been talking about the website a lot, and we've been mentioning it. I have yet to give the URL for that. So it is actually operationsupply.drop.org, no hyphens. And a great-looking site. What I like the most about it actually is at the very bottom it says built by veterans, which is always good to see. So right now, let's go back to the Respawn program and what that is about and how you're actually using games to help with the rehabilitation process.
Absolutely. I want to give the shout out because you mentioned it. The site is built by veterans. It's actually done by a company called Happy Joe. It's led by a gentleman named James Dahlman. He's actually a friend of mine out of Oklahoma. But that's happyjoe.com. They're veterans. They're great at design and great at development, and they help with the site. So give them credit where it's due. To your question about the Respawn program, so essentially, an interesting little backstory there. We as an organization had, I would say, attempted to work with WTBs and medical facilities a couple years ago, and didn't realize that it wasn't as impactful or as effective as it could be. And this was feedback we didn't get till a lot later, and it's because the actual facility didn't know what to do with these Xboxes. Where do you put them? They didn't have the same value, and this goes back to some work we did with Walter Reed a while back. And fast forward a bit, there's a gentleman. He's now our chief medical officer. He's Major Eric Johnson that saw that happening kind of from behind the scenes at Walter Reed. Couple that with some of his history and background, which we can dive into here momentarily, and it ends up Eric reaches out to us through some mutual friends and says, I think we can do better. Now, Eric's background, he just got out of the Army earlier this year. He'd been in for about 20 years, if I'm recalling correctly. As I mentioned, he got out as a major. Most recently, he was the chief of the burn unit at Brooke Army Medical Center down in San Antonio. But for the prior decade, because he's a huge geek and a huge gamer, he's got Star Wars and nerd tattoos all over him. He'd been, which is great, by the way. I went to his wedding, and his boutonniere was, it had Star Wars Lego figures, and the centerpieces were little scenes from Star Wars built out of Legos. Amazing family. But he'd been utilizing gaming from a healing. So we say the healing power of gaming, which to a lot of people, you kind of roll your eyes and go, yeah, right. That's just an excuse to make it seem like it's more powerful than what it is. But it's true. As an OT, as an occupational therapist, even starting that while he was deployed, forward in Afghanistan, started substituting gaming and elements of it for traditional occupational therapy methods. And we're not talking like some new age approach. We're literally saying the hardware that exists and the software that exists in gaming, you can utilize it to still medically capture and measure things like range of motion, balance, cognitive processing, those things that are super important to, your burn victims, your amputees, your vets with TBIs. And but what's interesting is in the concepts of occupational therapy is to get people's life back to where it was doing the things they love. So it's not so much about, I want to walk. It's, I want to be able to make a sandwich. I want to be able to play with my dog. And in order to do those two things, you need to be able to walk. And so it's a little bit different. And so when you look at a lot of the techniques, Eric's utilized with gaming, it's being able to use the Wii balance board. These amazing pieces of hardware that for those that are closed-minded about it, look past the fun part of it and say, oh, I get it, and then realize if you put fun back on top of it, you're a 21-year-old that's missing a hand and a leg. Do you want to stack cups and bounce the beach ball against the wall, which you probably still have to do anyways, by the way, or do you want to play a little bit of Rock Band with some of your peers that are also going through the same thing, which provides a psychosocial benefit to it as well? So you look at that relationship building, and we kind of piloted it middle of last year with Brooke Army Medical, and one thing led to another, and Eric became our chief medical officer. And so he's still a licensed occupational therapist, but he's helping us not just provide the product to these facilities, but also provide the framework and a little bit of training for the service to be able to say, here's an Xbox, and here's what you can do with it beyond just having fun. You can also utilize it and have a medical benefit.
Now, if there are some people involved in the medical field or actually have people they know that they think could benefit from this, how would they get hold of, what's the best way for them to get hold of Eric?
I'm going to still point it back to our general email because we can take care of it a few different ways, but it's enlist, ENLIST, at operationsupply.com. For any Twitter lovers out there, you can tweet at Eric directly. It's OT Unleashed, so OT like occupational therapist, Unleashed, and his name is Eric Johnson. But you can definitely get in touch with him. Loves talking to professionals. He was actually at a major OT conference over in Spain this past week, and definitely was the life of the party over there. Like I said, he's a strong character of an individual, and we're definitely looking to create that conversation. We were both part of a panel at South by Southwest MedTech back in March, and it was about, again, the healing power of gaming, and not so much from this real surface level side, but here is data that actually backs it. So if there's anybody listening that is going through therapy themselves, veteran or otherwise, as a matter of fact, or we have medical practitioners that are interested in exploring this further, please definitely reach out. Email us at enlist@operationsupply.org or reach out via Twitter.
All right, sounds great. At this time, I'd like to maybe switch gears a little bit and come at it from a little bit different standpoint. I know there might be some listeners out there that are interested in maybe moving to a nonprofit and working for them, or maybe even possibly starting their own. So if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a couple questions as far as your experience as being CEO of a nonprofit.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'd absolutely love to. I love encouraging others to go, especially and follow their passion and things beyond themselves.
Well, then what brings me to the first question was that you were already working really into a nonprofit that was working with youth or talented athletes that would, and as you said, actually help them get exposure, to get them picked up as college athletes and even professional ranks. What attracted you strongly to move over to Operation Supply Drop?
I would say without giving the epic adventure, there's really two things three actually that made it happen. So historically, I'm a civilian myself. My family has service members in it. My wife's family has even more. I definitely recall where I was, when 9/11 happened, and watched a lot of friends volunteer, and definitely appreciate that. But even back before then, I had one job where one of my colleagues was a Desert Storm veteran. Again, completely different time, but there's something different about him. It's kind of that haunted look. And mind you, again, back at that time, completely different context. I mean, the stuff that he and I would talk about then versus the similar conversations that somebody that's, been in Iraq or Afghanistan the past decade plus, real different. But that really just kind of turned me on to the, how can we help? These men and women deserve so much more. fast forward professionally, and I've always been kind of drawn to help veterans, especially in their transition professionally, and have mentored a number of them. So that was always there. But the other piece of the puzzle, there's two things that happened over the past 4 or 5 years. Number one was my wife actually got diagnosed with brain cancer. And that, it's not something really to dig into here. It is what it is, but it started to make me look at what I was doing professionally. And I think a lot of people hit this point. You question the value of it. I've been in the high-tech industry, helped build some amazing products, but you start going, well, what does it matter? And to me, for myself, it started not mattering. And so I wanted to be able to give back. But then, that last straw, so to speak, was I was out at a event at a ranch out in West Texas with Governor Rick Perry. And it was a private event. It was actually the serial number one delivery of this amazing rifle called by Tracking Point. And Rick Perry was there, and I had some opportunity to kind of chat with him, but he had a wounded warrior with him. And I found out he nearly always traveled with a wounded warrior, mainly because he felt that they deserved so much and wanted to expose them to different opportunities and different people. But what I also found really cool was, as a politician, at this event, he wasn't there to be a politician. He wasn't there to talk policy. And so anytime the conversation would kind of veer off towards that, he'd say, hey, did I introduce you to Sergeant so-and-so here? Here's his story. And he'd deflect and give that, shine the light on this individual. And at that time, it clicked. And I said, I want to be able to do that all the time, for every vet I come into. Now, from my family's perspective, we'd actually been donors to Operation Supply Drop, so that connection was there. But, I reached out to, the individual that was running it at the time and said, how can I help? I want to help you grow this thing and make it realize its potential. And, years later, here we are. Obviously skipping a lot of details, but that's really what drove me. And I think that's what drives a lot of people is you end up, dare I say, because I used to want to gag when people say, oh, I want to follow my passion. I get it now. I apologize if I ever offended anybody, making fun of that concept, but I get it. Serving veterans is my passion, and I'm blessed to be able to do it on a daily basis.
So it might be hard for you to do, but if you had to pick your favorite thing about being the CEO of Operation Supply Drop, what would that be?
I'd say it's so I will tell you my favorite thing is actually the part that I wish it didn't exist. It's the fact that there's individuals that feel comfortable enough to call me in the middle of the night because they need help. And the reason that's my favorite thing is because we have developed a community and a support system and the trust for folks to want, for those in need to want to reach out and ask for it. Obviously, I wish there wasn't the people in need, the veterans in need to have to facilitate those calls. And it's as I think about that, a lot of them come flooding back, and they usually happen once or twice a week. And they always, so far, they've always turned out well, which is terrific. But that's definitely my favorite part, And the less serious answer is I love coins and patches. And we get a lot of those. So I've got a nice spot on my desk for those, and it's always cool to see the appreciation and the gratitude, from those that we're serving from a community that's just so amazing.
If you don't mind, can you take me through a typical day in the life of CEO Glenn Banton?
Typical. I don't know if that's such a thing. It really depends. I've always had it described to me. It's like herding cats on fire in some cases. With nonprofits, we obviously very heavily rely on volunteers and the graciousness of the time of others. So that's a dynamic that, yes, as you said, I've done nonprofits before, and actually the volunteer base from that nonprofit was probably less mature and younger. But it's figuring out how to balance, this amazing leadership, some of which is paid staff, with, another layer of leadership, which is, major players in the business and professional world that also kind of heard, are heeding the call to support veterans and volunteering their time. And then it's, thousands and thousands of others that, some in a very coherent manner and others a little less so because they just blindly charge into the, hey, I want to do this. It's figuring out how to find the right spot for everybody. But, every single day there's the fun part of it, which is, getting to talk to developers or getting to develop new relationships with new partners, and identify kind of, cool ways to support veterans through cool campaigns. And there's the more mundane stuff that I actually think it's what holds a lot of smaller nonprofits from really growing, which is we're still businesses. You have to function like you have a P&L. Just because we're a nonprofit doesn't mean that you have to create profit. The reality, though, is the profit itself is what drives the programs. And I think that's one of those big misnomers that I hope changes over time. The gentleman that runs Team Rubicon has spoken out about this. I think the gentleman that runs Team Red, White, and Blue has done the same. But, yes, we have to be fiscally responsible, and we'll continue to do so. Our 88% of our donations go directly back into our programs, which is quite exceptional. And I can, again, thank our team for allowing us to do that. But at the end of the day, we still have to sit down and stare at books and inventory and, write receipts and balance things and figure out how to juggle what is quite difficult, because since there's no ownership of a nonprofit, you don't have, your traditional, angel investors or venture capital. You're truly selling somebody on an idea, and oftentimes you're selling them on the future of the idea of, here is the way to support veterans that makes sense. And it's definitely a leap for some. But again, I wouldn't trade this for anything, and that's not just saying it for the sake of saying it. It's fun. It's amazing to watch an organization grow at the clip we have, supporting as many veterans that we have.
Well, your growth really, truly has been amazing, taking a look at really the short amount of time relatively that you've been in business. Now, you mentioned about kind of like herding cats. The fact that you operate globally and you're supporting not only U.S., but the NATO and ANZAC, what are some of the keys you being able to do that, to operate globally? Do you utilize certain types of technologies? How do you make that happen?
Yeah, we have a number of different, tech platforms that we use behind the scenes. They're the types that other people are using, whether it's, we've gone through your Teamworks and your Trellos and your Salesforces. And the biggest challenge for our organization is, in our accountants and also our lawyers' words, we're kind of a combination of about 7 different business types. The supply drops themselves, it's a supply chain and logistics challenge. We have to find stuff. We have to inventory stuff. We have to warehouse stuff. We have to pack stuff, inventory stuff, ship stuff. That sounds like Amazon, right? And then on the team side of it, it's a true community. We exist in multiple cities, and we have, and we call them members technically by, the classification of it. We're not a membership organization, but they're volunteers. But being able to figure out, how do we communicate with them? How do we catalyze volunteering? How do we, share what's going on so that new people want to grow? But really what it comes down to is, I'll give credit where it's due with our COO, Ray Whitaker. He does an incredible job from an operations standpoint. We have some amazing people with logistics. But a lot of it is, we just, come hell or high water, we will get this done. We know that what we're doing is the answer to the problem we're trying to solve. And so we figure it out. It's not without difficulty. It is as crazy as it sounds to try to maintain a global community, because you have to, figure out, well, where do these people live online? Does it live in its own, intranet? Do they communicate on Facebook, Twitter, all of the above, part of them? And then how do you create standards that people feel like they're a part of something? That's the messaging, the part of Operation Supply Drop, while not mandating that Seattle and Indianapolis and, Wales all have to follow the exact same way that they communicate with their community, because maybe Seattle likes to use Facebook and maybe Wales likes to use Twitter. And so that's really the biggest challenge, but it's constantly, to use the startup cliche, it's building the car while it races down the highway, and then just making sure the wheels stay on. And I think, I know we have a good set of leadership that allows us to make sure the wheels stay on, and it's just making sure we build the car in a way that adheres to the mission as it's been stated, and, that's appealing to our support base.
Now, do you use formalized goal setting in both in your business and or your personal life?
Formalized, to a degree, these are kind of the business questions. Looking from a personal side of things, I kind of go back and forth with the what are goals. The one thing, I always tell my kids, a goal without a plan is just, it's hopes and dreams. And so I think we're as much focused on the plan coupled with somewhat nebulous goals in some cases, to become, I always phrase it, to become the next great 100-year veterans organization. Well, that's cool. That's a neat bumper sticker or a great tagline, but what does that actually mean behind the scenes? And that's where we kind of drill it down to, what are the metrics that we can hang our hat on, like the number of supply drops being spent, or more importantly, metrics like the time between request and shipment on a supply drop. And we made some significant changes the end of last year that took what was running over 90 days down under 30 in most cases for especially deployed units. And that's huge because if you look at the typical deployment being, 9-10 months, sending it out in 30 days allows them to partake in the morale boost that we're delivering for a lot longer. It makes the light shine for our organization more, which makes them want to be more involved when they come back home. And so we have a lot of those behind the scenes. On a team-by-team basis, we typically try to stay on a quarterly basis. These are the chapters under the teams program. At a minimum, one significant volunteer outing, one mandatory fun outing, and one fundraising event. And then we grow from there. But a lot of the goals that we've been setting end up definitely have to be tweaked constantly due to the growth and to make sure that we're listening to our community.
Now, again, this might be hard for you, but do you have a favorite story from your time at Operation Supply Drop that you'd like to share?
I have plenty, but my favorite one, and I have lots of these anecdotally from third person, but it's actually just working with 3rd Cav Brave Rifles out of Fort Hood. If there's such a thing, they're kind of my adopted unit. A lot is due to the proximity to where I live in Central Texas and being able to go up there. But I got to meet with the troops before they got to deployed to Afghanistan a few years ago. We actually delivered the supply drops ahead of time and actually developed a relationship where they kept in touch during their time while they were overseas. And being able to get the pictures back and almost maintain like a normal relationship was cool. But what was great is First Lieutenant Don Gomez, and he's now become a really good friend of mine and a huge supporter of the organization. He's actually on the board of directors now. But he started utilizing gaming as a way to reward people. So he'd set up Gears of War or FIFA tournaments, and whoever won, he'd end up taking whatever their craft duty was the next day.
That's a great idea.
And again, I'm saying that, and like anybody listening, and again, I'm coming at this from a civilian standpoint that, again, can only understand what that means in the context of, again, I get it in so much as I can from being a civilian. But the reality is I know what that means. I mean, look back a generation, like what else existed to be able to even do that if you wanted to? It really didn't. I mean, yes, you could exchange, you could exchange responsibilities, or somebody could just stand up and say, I'm going to do it for you. But creating a competition that builds camaraderie, allows a little bit of steam to be blown off, and then the winner gets to chill. Like, what's more generationally relevant than that? And then I think it shows amazing leadership on his part to be able to even come up with that. And we're starting to see that sort of thing grow more and more and more and more. But it's just incredible. I mean, just to hear those stories, I mean, anything from, gaming helps somebody deal with, indirect mortar or rocket fire because they were able to go just hunker down, put on, Call of Duty and crank up the volume, or put on some role-playing game and crank up the volume. I mean, stereotypically, yes, people like Call of Duty, but as I mentioned, FIFA is probably the most commonly requested game by the Army, up there close with Madden, weirdly enough. But, I mean, the stories all, though, no matter what, just come back to, in the supply drop, the point of it is a morale boost. It is escape. It's camaraderie building. It gives you the ability to do something fun that you might be doing back home, in between the suck. And that's what it does. Every single story we have, complex or simple, that's what they tell.
That's great. So what's next for Operation Supply Drop?
I mean, our big thing is scale. I mean, that's really what we've had to, due to the changes we've made in the fulfillment of our supply drops and even the leadership structure of the teams program, we now have this great problem, which is the demand for our services are now outpacing the supply of support. Again, a problem I love to have, but it started to get us into more traditional or seemingly traditional conversations from a support base. So my dream has always been, if I was to approach a 70-year-old CEO or founder of a fastener company in Michigan and tell him about Operation Supply Drop, I want them to immediately go, I get it. Not get caught up on the gaming part and saying, I'm not going to, gaming rots your brain, or gaming makes the troops soft, or just, I don't understand. I want them to look at it and say, I get it. It makes sense to support veterans in this way. And that's happening. So that's really what it is. It's scale. It's continuing to refine. It's looking at the Respawn program. I'd like to potentially fund some deeper research into utilizing gaming, both from a physical therapy side as well as digging back into looking at mental health, utilizing virtual reality. That's obviously a sexy topic in the gaming entertainment industry. I think there's some value to that in the medical space that we're willing to dig into. But we really, I mean, it's one of those things where my appeal is, hop on the train. I mean, this is something we're growing fast. We definitely do not lose sight of the most important focus, which is veterans. Providing veterans a way that they can continue to give back, but also ensuring that civilians that want to support veterans can feel like they're a strong part of this community. And, go check out the website, operationsupply.org, learn a little bit more about the programs. And, anybody that wants to speak to me personally about this, I'm willing to do so. I mean, that's my job at the end of the day, is really to evangelize and advocate for veterans. And if this is something you think makes sense for you, let's get you involved, whether it's where you live or looking at things a little bit more broadly.
That's fantastic, and I think that's probably a great way to kind of wrap this up. I'm going to make sure that we post all the different links below this on the website where this interview will be published, and also maybe I think we might have hit a couple acronyms in there that the general population might not understand, so I'll make sure that we get those covered too in that spot. But thank you so much, Glenn, for calling in today. It's been an eye-opener for me. I mean, even after doing the research, I learned a lot from what you shared today, so I really appreciate it.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on here.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.